When my daughter looked me in the eye and told me to find somewhere else to die, I thought I'd lost everything. 5 days later, sitting in a lawyer's office, I discovered my late husband had left me $23 million, and my daughter had forged his will to steal it all. She wanted me gone. Now she's the one behind bars. Don't miss a single beat of the story. Hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like, share this with a friend, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Your double dose of my 10 p.m. stories awaits you every single day at 10 p.m. and 10 a.m. For 49 years, Margaret lived quietly, wife, mother, keeper of a home filled with memories. Then her husband Robert died, and everything she knew crumbled. Her daughter Victoria, polished and perfect, swooped in with a will that erased Margaret's existence. Cast out to a motel room with nothing but 2 suitcases, Margaret uncovered a truth that would shatter her family forever. This is the story of a woman who stopped being a pawn and became the queen. I was Margaret Sullivan for 68 years before I became nobody. Wife of Robert, mother of Victoria, keeper of a house on Maple Street that held birthday cakes, anniversary toasts, and arguments that dissolved into laughter by morning. My hands knew every corner of that home, the loose tile in the bathroom, the drawer that was stuck in winter, the spot on the porch where sunlight pooled at 4 o'clock. Then Robert died and grief swallowed the walls whole. Victoria arrived 3 weeks after the funeral. My daughter, 38 years old, sharp-shouldered, with her father's calculating eyes and my careful smile. She walked through the door with her husband Kevin trailing behind, both dressed like they were attending a board meeting instead of visiting their grieving mother. She didn't hug me. She assessed me. "Mom, this house is too big for you now," she said, her voice clinical as if she were diagnosing a problem. "You're alone. You're getting older. Have you thought about what comes next?" I had thought about it. Mostly at 3 in the morning when the silence pressed down so hard I couldn't breathe. But I'd never imagined next would mean disappearing. Victoria walked through each room that day, touching things that weren't hers, measuring spaces with her eyes. Kevin followed silently, nodding at everything she said. They stayed for dinner, takeout I hadn't asked for, and left before dessert. "We'll talk soon," Victoria promised at the door. 2 days later, she returned with suitcases. Large ones. Expensive. Already packed. "Kevin got promoted," she announced, setting them down in my hallway like she owned. "We're moving in. It makes sense, doesn't it?" Before I could answer, she handed me a folded document. "Dad's will. Everything goes to me. You need to find your own place, Mom." The ground didn't open beneath me, but it should have. I stared at the paper in my hands, trying to make the words arrange themselves into something that made sense. Last will and testament of Robert James Sullivan. My husband's name. My husband's signature, or something that looked like it. "What do you mean, find my own place?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "This is my home." Victoria sighed, the kind of sigh you give a child who won't stop asking why. "Mom, legally the house is mine now. Everything is mine. That's what Dad wanted." Kevin stood behind her, arms crossed, saying nothing. He had always been good at that, standing silently while Victoria spoke, as if his presence alone validated everything. She said. I looked down at the will again. Dense legal language swam across the page. I saw Victoria's name repeated. I saw dollar amounts I didn't understand. I saw the house listed as part of the estate. But I didn't see my name anywhere. "There has to be a mistake," I whispered. "Robert wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" Victoria's tone sharpened. "Wouldn't it be practical? Wouldn't plan ahead? Dad knew you couldn't handle everything alone. He did this to protect you. Protect me by erasing me." "I need time," I said. "I need to think." "You have 3 days." Victoria's words cut clean through mine. "Kevin's firm closes on Friday. We move in this weekend. I've already called a realtor to help you find an apartment. Something small. Manageable." She said it like she was doing me a favor. Kevin finally spoke. "It's really for the best, Margaret." His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "You'll be much happier somewhere simpler." I looked at my daughter. My only child, the girl I'd rocked to sleep and taught to read. And held through every heartbreak. And I saw a stranger wearing her face. I should have fought that I should have screamed, demanded proof, called a lawyer, refused to leave. But I had spent 43 years being the kind of woman who didn't make scenes. The kind who smoothed things over, who bent to keep the peace, who believed that being quiet was the same as being strong. So I packed 2 suitcases, 1 box of photographs, a jewelry box with my mother's pearls and my wedding ring, the one Robert slipped on my finger when we were 23, and stupid with love. Victoria watched me from the doorway of my bedroom, arms folded, expression unreadable. "You're doing the right thing, Mom," she said. "You'll see." I didn't answer. I folded sweaters I'd worn for decades, tucked away shoes that had walked every mile of my marriage. I took nothing that would take up too much space in whatever tiny apartment Victoria deemed appropriate. When I zipped the last suitcase closed, Victoria softened just slightly. "You know I love you, right?" she said. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Searching for the little girl who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms, who made me Mother's Day cards with crooked hearts, who once told me I was her hero. I couldn't find her anywhere. "I know," I said. "'Cause what else could I say?" On the 3rd day, I stood in the driveway with my suitcases and my box, waiting for the cab Victoria had called. Kevin was already moving furniture through the front door, his furniture modern and cold, erasing every trace of the life Robert and I built. Victoria handed me an envelope. "First month's rent. For the motel. Until you find something permanent." A motel. Not even an apartment. As the cab pulled away, I didn't look back. The Riverside Motel sat on the edge of town, the kind of place people stayed when they had nowhere else to go. Peeling paint. Flickering neon sign. A front desk clerk who didn't ask questions. My room was on the 2nd floor, number 17. The door stuck. The carpet smelled like cigarettes and regret. The bed sagged in the middle and the shower sputtered brown water for the first 30 seconds. I set my suitcases down and sat on the edge of the bed. And for the first time since Robert died, I cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears I'd shed at the funeral. Not the controlled grief I'd allowed myself in the empty house while Victoria watched. I sobbed. Ugly, choking sobs that came from somewhere I didn't know existed. I cried until my ribs ached. Until my throat burned. Until there was nothing left. Then I opened the box of photographs. Robert and me on our wedding day, laughing at something the photographer said. Victoria as a baby, tiny and perfect, asleep on my chest. Family vacations. Christmas. Mornings. Birthday parties. A life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. I pulled out our wedding photo and traced Robert's face with my finger. "What did you do?" I whispered to the image. "Why would you leave me with nothing?" Robert had been many things. Stubborn. Proud. Set in his ways. But he wasn't cruel. He wouldn't have thrown me away like this. Would he? Doubt crept in. Maybe I hadn't known him as well as I thought. Maybe 40 years of marriage had been built on assumptions I'd never questioned. But some small stubborn voice deep inside wouldn't let that thought settle. Something was wrong. And I needed to know what. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting through thin curtains and the sound of trucks rumbling past on the highway. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then reality crashed back. The motel room, Victoria's cold eyes, the will that had stolen my life. I sat up slowly, my body stiff from the sagging mattress, and made a decision. I would see Robert's lawyer. Harrison Fitzgerald had been Robert's attorney for 20 years. He drafted our wills, handled property transfers, advised Robert on business matters I never fully understood. If anyone knew the truth, it would be him. I found his office number in an old address book I'd packed, one of the few things Victoria hadn't monitored. The receptionist tried to tell me Mr. Fitzgerald was booked for weeks, but I insisted. "Tell him Margaret Sullivan needs to see him today. It's about Robert's will." There was a pause. Then, "He can see you at 2 o'clock. I arrived early, dressed in the one good outfit I'd brought, a navy dress and pearls. Wanted to look like the woman I used to be, not the displaced stranger staring back at me from motel mirrors. Harrison's office was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood leather chairs, walls lined with law books that probably hadn't been opened in years. When he walked in and saw me sitting there, his face went pale. "Margaret." He stopped in the doorway, briefcase in hand, staring at me like I was a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "I came to ask about Robert's will," I said carefully. Harrison set his briefcase down slowly, his expression shifting from shock to something else. Confusion. Concern. "Margaret," he said quietly, "why weren't you at the reading?" The room tilted. "What reading?" Harrison sat down across from me, his hands folded on his desk, his face drawn. "The reading of Robert's will," he said slowly. "It was held 3 weeks ago. Your daughter said you were traveling, that you'd asked her to represent you." My breath caught. I wasn't traveling. I was home, grieving my husband. Harrison's jaw tightened. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a file and opened it carefully. Inside were documents, official-looking papers with signatures and stamps. "Victoria told me you were too distraught to attend. She showed me a signed letter, giving her power of attorney over your affairs during your extended absence." "I never signed anything like that." Harrison's face darkened. He pulled out another document, a single sheet of paper with my signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close. Very close. Someone had studied my handwriting, practiced it, forged it with precision. But I knew my own name, and that wasn't how I wrote it. "Harrison," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "I need to see the real will. Robert's actual will." He hesitated. Then he pulled out a bound document, thick, official, stamped with seals and dates. "This is the original," he said. "Signed by Robert 6 months before he died." He slid it across the desk. I opened it, and everything changed. The house, my house, the one Robert and I bought 37 years ago, was left to me. 70% of his assets, investment accounts, savings, business holdings. And at the bottom, a clause written in Robert's precise handwriting. "Victoria shall receive $10 million, provided she treats her mother with dignity and respect following my death. Failure to do so will result in forfeiture of her inheritance." My hand shook as I read the words again. Victoria was supposed to inherit $10 million. Only if she treated me with dignity. I looked up at Harrison, my voice barely a whisper. "She threw me out. She told me I was useless. She put me in a motel." Harrison's expression was grim. "Then she violated the conditions of the will, which means she forfeits her inheritance entirely." The words hung in the air between us. $23 million. That's what Robert had left me. And Victoria had known. She had seen this document, understood what it meant, and decided to take it anyway. "How did she do this?" I asked. "How did she convince you I wasn't coming?" Harrison pulled out more papers, emails, letters, documents I'd supposedly signed. All forgeries. All carefully constructed to paint a picture of a grieving widow too fragile to handle her own affairs. "She came prepared," Harrison said. "She had paperwork. She had explanations. She seemed concerned about you. I had no reason to doubt her. And the will she showed me? A fake. A very good one." I thought about Kevin. His smooth voice, his silence, the way he'd stood behind Victoria. Like a shadow. Kevin worked in finance. Kevin had access to resources. Kevin would know how to forge documents. "I need copies of everything," I said. "The real will. The forged papers. All of it." Harrison nodded. "I'll prepare them. Margaret, you need to understand this is fraud. Potentially criminal fraud. If you pursue this." I'm pursuing it. For 43 years I had been quiet. Accommodating. The woman who didn't make waves. But Victoria had made a mistake. She thought I was weak. Helpless. Someone who would disappear without a fight. She was about to learn what happens when you underestimate the woman who raised you. Harrison handed me a folder thick with documents. "Be careful," he said. "People who do this kind of thing don't stop easily." I stood holding the folder against my chest like a shield. "Neither do I." I returned to the motel with the folder tucked under my arm, my mind racing. $23 million. The house. Everything Robert had built. He'd left it to me. And Victoria had stolen it. I spread the documents across the motel bed, reading every word. Harrison had included everything. The real will, the forged documents, emails between Victoria and the attorney's office, even bank statements showing transfers Victoria had made the week after Robert died. She'd moved fast, calculated, precise, but she'd made mistakes. The forged signature was close but not perfect. The power of attorney letter referenced a trip I'd supposedly taken, but the dates overlapped with Robert's funeral. The emails were sent from an account I'd never used. Small cracks in a carefully constructed lie. I picked up my phone, an old flip phone Robert had insisted I keep for emergencies, and called the one person I knew I could trust. Diane Mosley speaking. Diane had been my friend for 30 years. We'd raised our children together, shared coffee every Tuesday morning, held each other through divorces and deaths and disappointments. Diane, it's Margaret. I need help. 20 minutes later, she was sitting on my motel bed, staring at the documents spread between us. That little bitch, Diane said flatly. I never liked her. I almost smiled. Diane had never been one for subtlety. What do? I asked. Diane looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something fierce in her eyes. You go to the police. You file charges. You take back everything she stole. She's my daughter. She threw you out of your own house and left you in a motel, Margaret. She forged legal documents. She committed fraud. Blood doesn't give her the right to destroy you. Diane was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of sending my own daughter to jail made my stomach turn. Diane stayed with me that night, refusing to let me be alone. We ordered takeout, terrible Chinese food from a restaurant down the street, and sat on the motel bed eating directly from the containers. Tell me about Robert, Diane said quietly. Did you know he'd done this? The will, the conditions, did you two talk about it? I shook my head. He handled the finances, the legal things. I trusted him. Did he know Victoria was like this? I thought about that. Robert and Victoria had always been close, too close sometimes. She was Daddy's girl. She could charm him into anything. But there were moments, especially in the last few years, when I'd caught Robert watching her with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe. Or concern. 6 months before he died, I said slowly, Robert changed. He was quieter. Distracted. He spent hours in his office going through papers, making phone calls. I asked him what was wrong, but he said it was just business. You think he knew something? I think he was protecting me. The will made sense now. The conditions. The careful language. Robert had seen something in Victoria, something I'd been too close to see, and he tried to shield me from it. But he died before he could warn me. What about Kevin? Diane asked. How involved is he? I pulled out the forged documents again, studying the signatures, the precision. Victoria's smart, but she's not this meticulous. Kevin works in finance. He'd know how to do this, how to make it look legitimate. Diane nodded grimly. Then they're both guilty. My phone rang, the motel's landline. Picked it up cautiously. Mom. Victoria's voice. Bright. Casual. As if nothing had happened. I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're settling in okay. My hand tightened around the receiver. I'm fine. Good. That's good. I'll come visit soon. She hung up before I could respond. Diane looked at me, her expression sharp. You didn't tell her? Not yet. Why? I set the phone down carefully. Because I want to know everything first. I want to know exactly how deep this goes. The next morning I went to the police. The station was small. Riverside wasn't a big town. And the officer who took my statement looked barely old enough to drive. But when I laid out the documents, his expression changed. He called his supervisor. Then a detective. Then someone from the fraud division. By noon, I was sitting in a conference room with 3 officers and a woman from the district attorney's office. Mrs. Sullivan, the DIS said, her voice professional but kind. What you're describing is forgery, fraud, and potentially elder financial abuse. These are serious felonies. I know. If we pursue this, your daughter will be arrested. Her husband too if he's involved. I know. She studied me for a long moment. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought about the motel room, the suitcases, the way Victoria had looked at me when she said, "Find somewhere else to die." Yes. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Bank records were subpoenaed. Digital forensics experts examined the forged documents. Victoria's emails were pulled. Kevin's work computer was seized. Within a week, the evidence was overwhelming. Victoria had transferred over $18 million into accounts under her name. Kevin had created the forged will using software from his office. They'd planned it together methodically, starting the day after Robert's funeral. And they'd thought I'd never find out. The detective called me on a Thursday afternoon. Kevin's mother showed up at the house 2 days later. Patricia Thornton Miller. That's what she called herself. Hyphenated. Old money trying to sound older. She didn't knock. She walked right in as if she owned the place, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "You have some nerve," she announced, finding me in the kitchen. I set down my tea carefully. "Excuse me. Sending my son to jail. Destroying his career. Ruining his life. Over what? Your precious feelings." I studied her. Expensive suit. Perfect hair. The kind of woman who'd never been told no in her entire life. "Your son committed fraud," I said evenly. "He forged legal documents. He helped steal millions of dollars. That's why he's in jail." Patricia's mouth twisted. "He was helping his wife, protecting his family. You should understand that. By throwing me out of my home? You're being dramatic. Victoria found you a place to stay. She was handling a difficult situation. And instead of being grateful, you've turned this into some vendetta. Grateful. She wanted me to be grateful for being discarded. What do you want, Patricia?" She pulled out her phone, scrolling through something, then turned it toward me. Photos. Robert with men I didn't recognize. Documents. Bank statements. "I have proof your husband was a criminal," she said coldly. "I have enough evidence to destroy his reputation completely. Every charity he donated to, every project he worked on. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man he really was. Unless you drop the charges against both of them today." I looked at the photos, the carefully compiled evidence she thought would break me. Then I pulled out my own phone and called Agent Torres. "There's someone here you need to talk to," I said. Patricia's face went white. "We're not sure yet, but Victoria and Kevin's activities led us to it. We're bringing in federal investigators." "Robert. My Robert. What had he done?" The FBI arrived 2 days later. 2 agents in dark suits sat across from me in the motel room, now the strangest place I'd ever conducted business, and laid out a timeline that made my head spin. Robert's construction company. Legitimate on the surface, but underneath contracts with shell corporations, payments that didn't match project costs, money moving through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. "We believe your husband was laundering money for a real estate development group with ties to organized crime," Agent Torres said. "We've been investigating them for 3 years. Your husband's name came up, but he died before we could interview him. I don't understand. Robert built houses, schools, community centers. He also moved $15 million through fake companies over the past decade. $15 million I knew nothing about." Agent Torres leaned forward, his expression careful. "Mrs. Sullivan, we don't think you were involved, but we need your cooperation. Victoria and Kevin's fraud investigation accidentally gave us access to records we've been trying to get for years. What do you want from me?" "Everything. Bank statements, business records, anything Robert kept at home. Victoria has the house." "Not anymore. Judge granted an emergency order this morning. The property is being held as evidence. You can return home today." "Home." The word felt foreign. "Will I be charged with anything?" "No. But your husband's estate is going to be frozen while we investigate. Which means I won't have access to the money. Agent Torres nodded. Not until we determine what's clean and what's not. Could take months, maybe longer. I sat back processing. Victoria was in jail. Kevin was in jail. Robert was a criminal. And I was back to having nothing. Except this time I wasn't going to disappear quietly. What do you need me to do? Agent Torres slid a folder across the table. Tell us everything you know. Moving back into the house felt like walking through a museum of someone else's life. Victoria and Kevin's furniture was still there, modern, cold pieces that didn't belong. The walls had been repainted. Family photos had been taken down, replaced with abstract art I didn't recognize. But underneath it all, the house still remembered me. The loose tile in the bathroom. The drawer that stuck. The spot on the porch where sunlight pooled at 4 o'clock. I stood in the living room, surrounded by FBI agents cataloging everything, and felt like a ghost haunting my own home. Agent Torres found me in Robert's office, a room I'd rarely entered during our marriage. It had always been his space. His papers, his files, his secrets. Now those secrets were spread across every surface. Bank statements showing transfers I'd never known about. Contracts with companies that didn't exist. Emails discussing deliveries and placements in language that sounded legitimate but meant something else entirely. Did you really not know? Torres asked, not unkindly. I trusted him. That's not an answer. I looked at the papers, the evidence of a life Robert had hidden from me. I didn't know, I said firmly. He handled the finances. I handled the home. That's how we worked. Torres nodded, making notes. Your daughter, did she know? The question hit me like cold water. Did Victoria know what Robert was doing? Is that why she'd acted so quickly after his death? Not just greed but panic, trying to secure money before someone discovered where it came from. I don't know, I admitted. We're going to find out. They worked through the night, boxing up documents, imaging hard drives, dismantling the carefully constructed lie Robert had lived. And I sat in the kitchen, my kitchen, drinking cold coffee and wondering who the hell I'd been married to. Victoria called from jail 3 days later. I almost didn't answer. But something, curiosity, anger, the need to hear her voice made me pick up. Mom. Her voice was small, shaking. Nothing like the cold confidence she'd had when she threw me out. Mom, please. You have to help me. Help you with what, Victoria? Get me out of here. Post bail. Talk to the prosecutors. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. You forged documents, I said calmly. You stole $18 million. You threw me out of my home and left me in a motel. Which part is the misunderstanding? Silence. Then, I was protecting you. Protecting me? From Dad's mess. From what he did. I knew the FBI was coming. I knew they'd freeze everything. I was trying to save what we could before it was too late. I sat down slowly, the phone pressed to my ear. You knew. Of course I knew. Dad told me everything before he died. He made me promise to take care of you. To get the money somewhere safe. Somewhere the government couldn't touch it. Robert told her. Not me. Her. So you stole from me to protect me? I was going to give it back. Once things settled down. Once the investigation was over. But you had to go to the police. You had to ruin everything. Her voice was rising now, desperation turning to anger. Do you know what you've done? She hissed. Kevin's firm dropped him. His family won't talk to us. I'm stuck in here with criminals. And for what? Because your feelings were hurt. I stood up, my hand gripping the phone so hard it hurt. My feelings weren't hurt, Victoria. My life was stolen. And you're the one who took it. I hung up. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like power. The FBI arrested Patricia Thornton Miller for obstruction of justice and attempted extortion. Turns out some of the documents she'd threatened me with were confidential, obtained illegally through Kevin's access to Robert's business records. She'd been helping them the whole time. Planning, plotting, thinking she could protect her son by destroying me. Agent Torres sat in my kitchen afterward, looking exhausted. This case keeps getting bigger, he said. Every time we think we've found the bottom, there's another layer. What happens now? Victoria and Kevin's trial is set for 6 months from now. Patricia will probably take a plea deal. And Robert's investigation. He trailed off. Tell me. Torres pulled out a folder thinner than the others but somehow heavier. Your husband wasn't just laundering money. He was skimming some of it, hiding it in accounts even his partners didn't know about. We found $3 million in an offshore account under a shell company registered in your name. My name. I didn't. We know. The signatures are forged. He used your identity without your knowledge. But legally you're listed as the owner. What does that mean? It means once we clear you and that money is yours. It's clean. Legitimate. Earnings from Robert's construction business before he got involved in the illegal stuff. $3 million. Not the $23 million Robert had left me in the will. But enough to rebuild. Enough to survive. There's a catch, Torres continued. The rest of the estate, the house, the investments, everything else will likely be seized. It's all connected to money laundering. You'll keep your personal belongings and anything you can prove you purchase with your own money. But the bulk of it, gone. Everything Robert built. Everything he promised me. All of it stained with crime I never knew existed. The trial started on a cold Tuesday in March. I sat in the courtroom, third row, left side, and watched my daughter being led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, no expensive clothes. Just Victoria. The girl-eyed raised. Kevin sat beside her, equally diminished. His lawyer, expensive, confident, whispered strategies that wouldn't save them. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged documents. Bank transfers. Email chains planning every detail. Patricia's testimony, given in exchange for a reduced sentence, had sealed their fate. Victoria's lawyer tried to argue duress, coercion, that Robert had manipulated them into continuing his criminal activities after his death, but the jury didn't buy it. The prosecution presented the timeline clearly. Victoria had started transferring money within hours of Robert's death. She'd thrown me out 3 weeks later. Every action had been calculated, deliberate. When it was my turn to testify, Victoria stared at me from across the courtroom. Her eyes were pleading, desperate, asking me to save her the way I'd saved her from every mistake, every consequence her entire life. But this time I couldn't. The prosecutor asked me questions I'd rehearsed a dozen times. Did your daughter tell you about the will reading? No. Did she give you time to find alternative housing? 3 days. Did she express any remorse for her actions? No. Victoria's face crumpled. I looked away. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Victoria, 8 years. Kevin, 10 years. The judge explained sentencing: fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse. Each charge, adding years, stacking consequences like building blocks. Victoria sobbed. Kevin stared straight ahead, emotionless. And I sat perfectly still, feeling nothing and everything at once. My daughter was going to prison. Because of me. I visited Victoria in prison 3 months after sentencing. I didn't plan to. I didn't want to. But something pulled me there. Guilt, closure maybe. Just the need to see her one last time before I left town. The visiting room was exactly what you'd expect. Gray walls. Plastic chairs. Guards. Watching everything. Victoria looked different. Older. Harder. Prison had stripped away the polished veneer she'd worn her whole life. She sat down across from me, separated by a scratched plexiglass divider, and picked up the phone. You came, she said. I almost didn't. She nodded, accepting that. I'm sorry. The words hung between us, too small for what had happened, but the only ones she had. Are you? I asked. Or are you just sorry you got caught? Victoria's jaw tightened. Both probably. I don't know anymore. For the first time since this began, she looked genuinely lost. Did you ever love me? I asked. Or was I always just in the way? Of course I loved you. Her voice cracked. I still do. But Dad, he taught me to be smart, to be strategic, to protect myself first. And when he died and I saw what kind of mess he'd left behind, I panicked. I thought if I could just secure the money, keep it safe, we'd both be okay. You threw me out. I was trying to protect you from the investigation. By making me homeless? I thought once everything's settled I could bring you back, give you the money, make it right. I studied her face, searching for truth in the lies. Maybe she believed what she was saying. Maybe she'd rewritten history so many times she couldn't remember what actually happened. Or maybe this was just another manipulation. I forgive you, I said quietly. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. But I'll never trust you again. I left town the day the house sold. A young couple bought it, first-time homeowners with a baby on the way. They had no idea about the history and I didn't tell them. Some ghosts weren't mine to share. The $3 million from Robert's offshore account cleared. Clean money, the FBI confirmed. Legally mine. I used some of it to buy a small cottage 2 states away. Nothing fancy. Just 2 bedrooms, a garden, and a porch that got good morning light. The rest I put in a trust for Victoria if she ever got out and needed help starting over. Not because she deserved it, but because I wanted to be the kind of person who still believed in second chances. Diane helped me move, driving the U-Haul herself and refusing to let me lift anything heavy. You're really doing this, she said as we unloaded boxes into my new home. I really am. Are you happy? I thought about that. Happy felt like too big a word for what I was. But content? Peaceful? Maybe something close to free? I'm alive, I said. For the first time in a long time, I'm actually alive. That night, I sat on my new porch with a glass of wine and watched the sun set over unfamiliar trees. Somewhere, Victoria was in a cell, counting down 8 years. Somewhere, Robert's secrets were still being unraveled by investigators who'd never met him. Somewhere, the life I'd built for 43 years was being dismantled piece by piece, by people who didn't know my name. But here, in this quiet place with no history and no ghosts, I was just Margaret. Not wife. Not mother. Not victim. Just me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Some endings aren't clean. Some families shatter beyond repair. But Margaret learned that survival isn't about keeping the pieces together. It's about knowing when to let them fall. Tomorrow night, another life. Another secret. Another truth that won't stay buried. Stay close. If this story touched you, stay with me for the next one. Tap subs.